Right now, somewhere in the world, a woman is walking into a hospital to give birth. Machines beep, nurses check monitors. A doctor stands ready with tools built for exactly this moment. It feels controlled. It feels safe. But the real answer is far stranger, because for most of human history, birth was the single most dangerous event a person could survive, and nobody understood why. You're about to find out what happened the very first time your ancestors realized childbirth could kill, not in a hospital. Not with tools. Just a cave, a fire, and a scream that would not stop. Let's go back. Not centuries, millions of years. Roughly 6 million years ago, something changed in the way your ancestors moved through the world. They stood up. They started walking on 2 legs instead of 4. It sounds simple. It was not. Standing upright meant redesigning the entire skeleton from the ground up, and one of the parts that had to change the most was the pelvis. A wide, sprawling pelvis is great for a 4-legged animal. It is terrible for balance on 2 legs, so over time, the human pelvis narrowed and rotated into a tighter, more compact bowl shape. It made walking efficient. It made running possible. It made your ancestors some of the best endurance movers on the planet. But that same narrow bowl was also the exit door for every baby ever born. At almost the same time, something else was happening, something that would collide with this new narrow shape in the most inconvenient way imaginable. Brains were growing, not slowly, dramatically. Over about 2 million years, the human brain roughly tripled in size. Bigger brains needed bigger skulls, and bigger skulls had to somehow travel through that same narrow passage that walking had just made smaller. Anthropologist Sherwood Washburn was the first to name this collision clearly. Back in the 1960s, he called it the Obstetrical Dilemma. 2 of the traits that made humans successful, walking efficiently and thinking exceptionally well, were fighting each other inside every single pregnancy. A wider pelvis would make birth easier, but walking harder. A narrower pelvis would make walking easier, but birth far more dangerous. The human body picked an uneasy compromise, and every mother and baby since has lived inside that compromise. So how did the human body cheat its way out of an impossible situation? What was the workaround? It gave up, sort of. Instead of growing the brain to full size before birth, the human body decided to kick the baby out early and finish the job afterward. Human infants are born at a stage of development that would be considered wildly premature for almost any other primate. A newborn chimpanzee can already cling to its mother's fur within hours. A newborn gazelle can stand and run from predators on its first day of life. A human newborn cannot lift its own head, cannot regulate its own body temperature well, cannot do almost anything except cry, feed, and sleep. You were born unfinished. Every person who has ever lived was born unfinished, their brain still expanding rapidly for years outside the womb because it simply ran out of room inside. But being born early did not make birth safe. It only made it survivable barely, and only some of the time. Picture the moment this story is really about. Somewhere in Africa, tens of thousands of years ago, a woman goes into labor. There is no midwife with formal training, no forceps, no ultrasound that already warned everyone the baby was Breech. Just firelight, the sound of the forest outside, and instinct passed down through generations of women who had done this before, and some who had not survived doing it. And here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Unlike almost every other primate on Earth, human mothers throughout history rarely gave birth completely alone. Why would that be? Chimpanzees give birth alone quietly, often at night away from the group. Gorillas do the same. Most primates treat birth as a private, solitary event. So why did humans break that pattern? Anthropologist Wenda Trevathan spent decades trying to answer exactly that question. She proposed what is now known as the Midwifery Hypothesis. Because of the twisted, narrow shape of the human birth canal, babies are usually forced to rotate as they descend, so that they are born facing away from the mother toward her back rather than her front. A chimpanzee giving birth can reach down between her own legs, guide her baby out, clear its nose and mouth, and lift it straight to her chest. A human mother mechanically often cannot do this safely. The angle is wrong. Pulling a baby forward, facing the wrong way, risks injuring its spine or cutting off its airway at exactly the wrong moment. So evolution nudged the human species toward something almost no other animal does. It nudged mothers toward needing help. That first birth, the one at the center of this story, was not attended by a trained doctor. It was attended by whoever happened to be closest. A sister, a grandmother, a friend from another family group who had wandered over at the sound of distress. Someone who had seen a birth before, or who was simply unwilling to walk away from the sound of another person in pain. That instinct to stay to help, to refuse to abandon a laboring woman, may be one of the oldest cooperative behaviors your species ever developed. It may be older than language, older than fire, and it had to exist, because when something went wrong, it went wrong quickly, and it went wrong often. Consider a breech birth where the baby arrives feet first instead of head first. Today, a breech position is caught weeks in advance on an ultrasound screen, and a surgeon simply schedules a cesarean. Your ancestors had none of that warning. The first sign of trouble was often the moment it was already too late to fix. A foot emerging where a head should have been. A cord wrapped where it should not have been. A labor stretching past a full day with no progress at all. Every one of these situations, routine and manageable in a modern hospital, was potentially fatal in a cave. And every helper standing nearby had to make impossible decisions with nothing but instinct, memory, and desperation to guide them. Twins made everything even more dangerous. So did a baby simply too large for a particular mother's frame. An outcome largely determined by genetics no one in that cave could have understood. There was no way to measure, no way to predict, no way to plan ahead. Every single birth was, in a very real sense, a roll of the dice, repeated again and again across every family, in every generation. For hundreds of thousands of years, skeletal evidence from ancient burial sites tells a quiet, brutal version of this story. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of young women buried together with newborn infants, both clearly dead at the same time, with no signs of violence or trauma on the bones. No spear wounds, no animal bites, just labor that lasted too long, or a baby positioned wrong or bleeding that never stopped once it started. Researcher Karen Rosenberg, who has spent much of her career studying the evolution of human childbirth, has pointed out again and again that dangerous, difficult labor is not some unfortunate modern complication caused by hospitals or lifestyle. It is written directly into the architecture of the human skeleton. It has been this way for a very, very long time. Now here is where the story gets even stranger, because not every researcher agrees on why. For decades, the obstetrical dilemma was treated almost like settled fact. Walking narrowed the pelvis, brains grew larger, and birth became dangerous as a trade-off. But more recently, anthropologist Holly Dunsworth and her colleagues challenged part of this story. Their research suggests that the human pelvis is not actually as tightly limited by walking efficiency as scientists once assumed, and that babies are born early, mainly because of metabolic limits, not just pelvic ones. In other words, at some point during pregnancy, a growing fetus simply demands more energy than a mother's body can continue supplying, and birth becomes the only option left, regardless of head size. Why does this shift in thinking matter to you? Because it reveals something important. Even scientists studying the same skeletons, the same fossils, the same ancient bones, are still arguing about exactly why childbirth became so dangerous for humans. The mystery your ancestors lived through and sometimes died from is one modern researchers are still actively trying to fully solve. But back at that fire, in that cave, none of this theory mattered. What mattered was the sound. Imagine standing just outside. You hear the screaming. You do not understand contractions or dilation or fetal positioning. All you understand is that someone from your group is in agony, and there is no guarantee how this ends. What kind of fear does that create in a small group of maybe 20 or 30 people, all of whom depend on each other to survive the next season? That panic was not weakness. It was information. It told everyone nearby that this moment mattered enormously, that the outcome was uncertain, that two lives, not one, were balanced on a single unpredictable hour. For early humans living in small hunter-gatherer bands, a birth going wrong was never just a private tragedy. It was a demographic emergency. Small groups depended on every successful birth to survive across generations. Lose a mother, and the newborn usually died soon after, along with any older children who still relied on her for milk and care. Lose too many mothers across too many seasons, and an entire group could simply vanish within a lifetime. So when the screaming started, Everyone nearby had a very real, very personal reason to hold their breath. This may be exactly why, across nearly every human culture ever studied by anthropologists, childbirth became deeply ritualized. Specific songs, specific chants, specific postures for labor, herbs and plants whose full effects modern science still hasn't completely mapped. None of this was random superstition invented out of boredom. It was humanity's earliest form of medicine, built entirely from trial, memory, and desperation. If something worked once, it was remembered and repeated. If a woman survived doing something specific during labor, that action was treated as sacred knowledge, passed carefully from one generation of women to the next. In some cultures studied by anthropologists, laboring women were encouraged to remain upright, squatting or kneeling, using gravity itself as a tool, long before anyone understood the word gravity in a scientific sense. In others, specific plants were chewed or brewed to ease pain or speed contractions, remedies discovered through generations of careful, dangerous trial and error. In still others, a laboring woman was surrounded by the rhythmic sound of other women singing, a practice some researchers believe may have genuinely helped by lowering stress hormones that can slow labor down. None of these societies had a word for oxytocin. None of them needed one. They simply noticed what seemed to help, and they kept doing it. Over tens of thousands of years, that slow accumulation of trial and memory gradually hardened into real, transmittable knowledge. Certain women within a group became known for their steady hands and calm presence during difficult labors. They became, in effect, the very first specialists your species ever produced. This happened before agriculture existed, before writing existed, before anything resembling what we would call civilization today. The first profession in human history may not have been hunting, or tool-making or farming as most people assume. It may have been midwifery, and still, for most of human history, the danger never fully disappeared. Right up until roughly the last 200 years, childbirth remained one of the leading causes of death for women of reproductive age across nearly every society on the planet. Queens died from it, farmers' wives died from it, enslaved women died from it. It did not discriminate based on wealth, status, or geography. It was simply the ongoing price the human body had quietly been paying ever since your ancestors stood upright and started thinking a little too well for the size of their own pelvis. Fast forward, from that first cave to the earliest written civilizations, and the danger had not gone anywhere. Ancient Egyptian medical papyri describe birthing bricks, low platforms a woman would crouch on during labor, along with spells and remedies meant to protect against the very real possibility of death. Ancient Mesopotamian texts include prayers specifically written for women in labor, prayers that only make sense in a world where everyone understood the odds were never guaranteed. In ancient Rome, physicians wrote detailed instructions for handling difficult births, including early forms of what we would now recognize as a cesarean, though the procedure was almost always performed only after the mother had already died, in a desperate attempt to save the child. Even as human civilization built cities, invented writing and constructed empires, this one specific danger followed every single generation forward unsolved. It took thousands of years and enormous advances in anatomy, hygiene, and surgery before childbirth finally became something closer to safe in much of the world. Even now, in places without reliable access to modern medical care, it still is not fully safe. The ancient danger your earliest ancestors faced by firelight has never completely disappeared. It has only been pushed back decade by decade by generations of researchers, midwives, and physicians who kept refining what those first helpers in that first cave began purely out of instinct. So why does any of this matter to you? Right now, in a world of modern hospitals, fetal monitors, and emergency cesarean sections available at a moment's notice, because that ancient fear never actually disappeared. It only changed shape. Every delivery room today still carries a faint trace of that first cave, that first scream, that first small crowd of frightened, determined people refusing to leave someone's side. Modern medicine has given us statistics and survival rates that would look like pure miracles to your ancestors. But the emotional core underneath all of it, the fear, the vigilance, the instinct to gather close around someone in danger, has not changed in 100,000 years. It is still there, quietly running underneath all the machines. Think about the last time someone you loved went through something frightening and uncertain. Surgery, a diagnosis, a dangerous moment with no guaranteed outcome. Did you feel that same specific pull? The need to stay close, to not walk away, to remain present even though there was nothing you could actually fix yourself. That pull is not modern. It was not invented by therapy, or taught to you by a parenting book, or built by society as some kind of social nicety. It is a leftover instinct from a cave, from a birth, from a moment when simply staying with someone in danger was one of the only real tools your ancestors had. Even the modern hospital room, for all its steel and screens, still quietly echoes that ancient arrangement. A partner holding a hand, a nurse who has seen this before, offering calm words the way an experienced grandmother once did by firelight, a doctor watching numbers on a monitor, the way an ancient helper once watched a mother's face for signs of trouble. The tools changed completely. The underlying pattern did not change at all. Someone in danger, someone else choosing to stay close, watching, ready to act the moment something shifts. And maybe that is the real reason this particular moment in prehistory still matters, tens of thousands of years later. Not because of the biology, although the biology is genuinely fascinating, not because of the fossils or the pelvis measurements, or the ongoing scientific debates about exactly why human birth became so dangerous in the first place. It matters because of what your ancestors decided to do about a danger they could not fully understand or control. They did not have anesthesia. They did not have antibiotics. They did not have a single tool that could guarantee a good outcome. What they had was each other, and a refusal to let that be enough of a reason to walk away. Right now, somewhere in the world, a woman is walking into a hospital to give birth. It feels controlled. It feels safe. But underneath the machines and the monitors and the calm professional voices, the same ancient story is still quietly playing out, the way it has for roughly 2 million years. Someone is in danger, and someone else has chosen not to leave.